be the ad. Good job with all those names. It's tricky. So, interruptions. They have a tendency to be a bit challenging. When you've waited so long to watch that show or read that book or work on that project and a text message flashes across your screen, you can try to ignore it. In fact, it might be very helpful for you to turn off notifications, silence your phone so you can go back to doing those long awaited projects. But then your smartwatch vibrates and it's the same person. Okay, maybe I can tune it out again. They can wait just 30 minutes. I just got 30 minutes of solid me time and I'm going to use it wisely. But then, oh wait, it's no longer a text message, it's a phone call. And I guess that project will have to wait. Now it's too important to ignore or delay. Or sometimes you ignore it anyways. On the weeks that I am scheduled to preach, I set aside at least 2 days to sit in the text, to read, to write, to learn, to develop a sermon that connects, that makes sense, that you're listening to me for a reason. This is a good use of your time, of your 30 minutes. Um, for me, sometimes it takes a bit of time to get into gear to start making connections and then I go into hyper focus mode where I do put my phone on do not disturb. I plug in my headphones. I listen to the instrumental music because that's the only thing that doesn't distract me, and I try to shut out the world. When I finally get into that flow of writing, I want to write it out as long as possible. There are days where I attempt to even to Ed's chagrin rearrange my afternoon schedule to accommodate the flow because I know how long it took to get there, how long it's going to last, and if disrupted, how much more effort I'll need to commit to get back on track. It's just something that I've learned about my brain. It's okay. I've just learned about it. But like clockwork, like for any of us, the interaction will come and have the choice to either ignore it or address it. And I can waste even more time doing all the mental gymnastics of determining whether or not it's an emergency or if it's a minor issue that can be delayed or it's an excuse just to get some attention or it's something much deeper that actually requires eye contact and a hug. I don't always get it right. In fact, I most always get it wrong. Those moments when I'm at home in my home office and I'm writing away and someone who may not be named pops up into my peripheral and asks me a question, a random question, hoping that said person, said mom, will look at him and say yes this time, which would make him feel loved. Or maybe it's those moments where Ed, he needs someone to listen, to reassure him. Those moments when even my own body is telling me to stop and rest so I can have a better restart. And instead, I usually get frustrated. I usually lash out and remain tense. I usually get this wrong. But I wonder if what if those disruptions were actually God's attempt to redirect my attention? And it might not be something really, really big, but there might be some kind of posture shift that God's trying to get my attention about that I need to follow that instead. What if God is trying to tell me something simple or important? Today, we're in our second week of our worship series. Isn't it ironic? I'm so proud. This side of the room, you got work on it, Sally. I'm looking at you. We are reading Bible stories that use irony to help us understand God and what faithfulness can look like. These are stories that are not meant to be how to's, but rather how not to. They describe how the characters miss the point of what God was trying to teach. And it's relatable to read these stories of folks who just didn't get what was going on because I usually don't get what's going on. So let's take a step back to get a bigger picture of what's happening in the book of Numbers. The overall message is that God is faithful even when God's people aren't. What we read is that God isn't trying to force or coerce people, but always allowing them to choose whether or not they'll trust God with their needs. And when they don't, God allows them to face the consequences of their choices. So, Numbers talks about the story of Israel after God freed them from slavery to Egypt, appointing Moses to lead them into the wilderness. God brought them to Mount Sinai as this landing place, made a covenant with them, saying, I will be your God, you will be my people. And what we learn throughout the book is that Israel isn't great at holding up their end of the covenant, but God is. And we hear the story of how they're rebuilding their community with God's presence at the center. Everything else is built around God as the center of their lives. And so the book of Numbers, it begins as Israel is wrapping up their 1-year camping stay at Mount Sinai, a year of learning how to live in a world of unknowns following the movements of God. Moses is still the leader, and they're making their way into the wilderness, and on their way to the land God promised to Abraham one day to establish themselves as a nation with roots and with rhythms, with a new way of life. They make their way through the region uh, just across from their destination. Throughout their journey, the people, they're hyper focused on the challenging situations right in front of them, and they're not able to see the bigger picture. Totally get it. We do this all the time. Totally relatable. Over and over, God goes before them, continues to honor the covenant. They choose other paths and postures that make sense to them in this moment. They make bad decisions. God allows them to experience the just consequences of those decisions. And at the same time, God also shows them mercy by providing food and water, the answer to their hunger and their thirst all along the way. At no point in the whole wilderness journey does God just up and disappear. God's presence is there. The Israelites, they aren't excited about the journey. They're hungry, they're thirsty, and they really miss home, even though home was when they were enslaved to a different people. They aren't happy with Moses. Even his own brother and sister are grumbling and they're bad mouthing him in front of people. Not a good look. And when you're that hungry and thirsty, you tend to zero in on that problem right in front of you, and it becomes unbearable, aka you become unbearable to everyone else around you. You get hangry. Anything and everything can go wrong, and it's always somebody else's fault. I feel you looking at me, Ed. I don't know why. Just me? Okay. It's just me. I am the one. God knows this about people. God knows this about Melissa, which is why manna and water were always provided throughout this journey. The Israelites, they make their way to Paran. They're halfway there to the promised land. And God tells Moses, all right, send out 12 spies to scout out the promised land. Let's see what the situation is. They explore, 10 of them come back. Let's not do that. That's a no-go. It's not safe. Two other spies come back and they say, I think God can save us. Let's go for it. Let's do it. But like any situation, the majority wins, and that crew started planning a rebellion to have a new leader, and they would head back home. Home. And God is frustrated with people. And Moses intercedes on their behalf. And and he calls out to God, remember your promise to Abraham? Can we keep going, please? Can you keep honoring that covenant, even though we're not great at it? So God does, but allows the community to experience the consequences of their actions and their unfaithfulness of the covenant. God gives them what they want. Though these who are fighting me aren't going to get to the promised land. They're just going to wander around in the wilderness the rest of their lives. But their kids, the kids are going to get to experience their new home. After more infighting and drawing lines, they head back out on the road. Israel repeats the same complaints. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. I want to go home. And they're frustrated at Moses. And God tells Moses to speak to a rock to bring out water for them. And Moses takes some liberties and tries to put himself in this position of power, and he earns the same consequence that he's no promised land for you either, but God still provides for their needs while they wander in the wilderness. And then they head into Moab, and this is where we meet Balaam. Balaam is a famous prophet in this land. He's seen as a person who speaks directly to the gods, with the gods, that can either positively or negatively impact the people. So he's discerning and intervening and manipulating, and Balaam is seen as one who could curse one's enemies and pronounce one's benefits. Like, it's the kind of power connection that you would want to have in your back pocket. Now, Balak is the king of Moab, and he sees this massive group of people coming into his territory. Thousands upon thousands of people entering into your land, people you don't know why they're there, and you're nervous, you're freaked out. Balak wants somebody with credibility, like Balaam, to come in to take care of the situation, to curse these people and shoo them off of his property, off of his land. But what we remember about the bigger picture, about God's faithfulness to the Israelites, even though they don't know what God is doing, God's going to protect them from harm and provide for them in ways they will likely never know or understand. God is up to something here. Even as the Israelites are coming into this territory, God is up to something here, even though Balaam doesn't see the bigger picture and Balak definitely does not. Balaam, this prophet, he consults Israel's God, which I don't know. I wonder if that was a new conversation since he's talking with all these other gods. Is this conversation with Israel's God a new one? I don't know. Just a nerding question. The Lord tells him not to trust these messengers, that he cannot curse Israel because they are a blessed and protected people. This is part of that big promise, that covenant promise that God made with Abraham. I'm going to protect you all this way. And Balaam, you're not going to get in the way of my protection of this people. But, Balak, the king of Moab, he's apparently the kind of guy that doesn't take no for an answer, and he persuades Balaam to come. So Balaam, he relents, and he sets out for Moab, and he's preparing to follow Balak's instructions. And what the text says, in usual fashion, he rides his donkey that has taken him everywhere. This is Old Faithful. This is the animal that has seen things and been with him through so many journeys. It is interesting that the mule is actually a female, which is really uncommon. And I think it lends to this theme of irony, that because what we discover in this story is that the female donkey is more attuned to the ways of the Lord than one of the most powerful and sought after prophets. God is not happy with Balaam's choice to accept Balak, the king of Moab's offer. So The story tells us while on the way, the female donkey is acting up and Balaam isn't having it. The donkey sees what the prophet can't or won't, and she was trying to protect him from harm. She sees the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a sword in his hand to block their path, and the donkey tries to avoid it 3 different times. Big red truck. Get the point. Each time, Balaam is annoyed and acts out of annoyance and beats the donkey. He has somewhere to be, and this animal is not going to be the reason he's late. He sees only a disobedient animal in front of him that he can manipulate into getting what he wants. The donkey sees the presence of something divine that is interrupting with a purpose. And God finally opens the donkey's mouth to speak, which is absurd. A talking donkey. And what movie do we all think about? Shrek. I'm sure you hear Eddie Murphy's voice in the back of your head. I'm not doing an impression today. That's not going to go viral. Sorry, you can do it in your own head. Balaam is so focused on getting to Moab that he doesn't take a second to think about the talking donkey that has never talked before and will never talk again. Doesn't even think about it. He is just so in line with what's happening, with what he's about to do, and that he argues with it. He just argues with the talking donkey. I wonder what his servants and these Moabite officials were thinking, because they were there too. I don't know. Did they hear the donkey talking? I don't know. Was it all in his head? I don't know. But it's weird. Weird donkey, weird conversation, weird day. And maybe the heat was getting to them. I don't know. And the donkey says to Balaam, she essentially says this: "What have I done to you to deserve this mistreatment? Haven't I always been your preferred mode of travel? And when have I ever acted this way? Don't you think this is unusual? Like, really strange that I'm going out of the way, which I don't normally do, and, talking out loud, which I don't normally do. When have I ever done that? Don't you think this is a sign that God is trying to get your attention about something?" And then God opens Balaam's eyes. And I wonder if he was like, "Oh, I get it now." And the angel informs him what's actually going on. His life has been spared thanks to the donkey protecting him. And he instructs Balaam to continue on the path into Moab, but firmly warns him that you can only speak the words that I give you. No getting creative, no taking liberties. Just say what I tell you to say. 3 different times, and further in the story, Balaam finds that he can't curse Israel. He can only declare blessings over them. It echoes back to that bigger picture of God's promises to Abraham that the people will be numerous and whoever blesses them will be blessed. The bigger picture. It's a mysterious and challenging and very illuminating scene in this biblical narrative that fits a larger pattern. Sometimes God uses unusual means to capture the attention of a prophet. Balaam's overall story shows God's grace, that while Israel is grumbling in their camp, ready to go home, whatever that means, that God is protecting them from outside threats and even blessing them. The bigger picture of what God is doing versus their limited view. These wilderness stories that get repeated over and over throughout the Old Testament because they were seen as a warning. God will forever be faithful to God's covenant promises, but also will allow the people to walk away in rebellion and face the consequences of their actions. Sometimes the people who are most confident that they speak for God can be the least aware of what God is actually doing. Sometimes the voice of truth doesn't sound like a prophet, but sounds more like an interruption or resistance or someone you already decided not to listen to or a repeated word or phrase that just keeps coming. Balaam lurks in all of our hearts. It shows up when we're so convinced we are right, when we're frustrated that things don't go the way we want, when we completely miss the fact that God might be the one standing in our way. Perhaps perhaps it is God who is protecting us from the harm we cause ourselves or to others, disrupting our repeated phrases that keep us enslaved to unhealthy boundaries and pain. Showing us that God loves us so much that God might speak through unlikely sources to get our attention and to redirect our focus on what matters. Those divine disruptions can lead us to a path of humility, to surrender to the ways of God, even if we might not fully understand, to slowly recognize what God is doing right in front of us and in the bigger picture. When I get that knock on my office door, when someone, Greg, walks up the stairs to the loft, when someone calls to talk, when Jude suddenly pops up into my peripheral view, it just might be a sacred or divine disruption. There might be a purpose to it, not just a distraction. There might be an actual purpose to it. Maybe I might not even know it. They might not even know it, but it might show itself over time. An invitation into a different posture, maybe onto a path of humility that maybe, Melissa, the sermon isn't more important than spending quality time with my family. Then maybe I can trust that God will get me back on track, back into the flow right when I need it. Then maybe this book, however great, can be put on pause to be present with someone who really needs a friend, and maybe it took them a long time to ask for that moment and it took a long time for them to find courage. Maybe it's the moment I need to stop and listen. Then maybe that random thought that popped in my head more than 3 times actually needs a little bit more attention and maybe some silent reflection. Then maybe my friend waiting for me to send that text message I've been mulling around for a while and not sure where it's gonna go. Maybe there's something there. And then maybe that prayer walk or that walk with your family on a random Saturday is more important than the to-do list. So I wonder, for you, how is God interrupting you? How might God be redirecting your attention? How might God be calling you to be part of something bigger, even in your community? Kind of like how God redirected Balaam to protect Israel. Whatever the interruption may be, and whoever may be waiting for us, may we allow ourselves to tend to God's persistent voice and presence and faithfully follow. Let's pray.